Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus said, I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and much stress I am under until it is completed. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say, it is going to rain. And so it happened. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be scorching heat. And it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky. But why do you not know how to interpret the present time? The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please pray with me. Lord God, thank you for the gift and blessing of another day of life, another opportunity to worship you. We pray, Lord God, that you would prepare our hearts and our minds and our spirits and our bodies to encounter you and to see you face to face, to hear your word preached, Lord, to hear your word read, and to receive your word in sacrament. Lord, we pray that you would reveal yourself profoundly to us today, and that as we encounter you, you would transform us, restore what is broken, heal what is ill, Lord, and strengthen us for eternal life. And we pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Please be seated. Morning. It is so great to see you all today. Well, in our family, we like to make fresh pressed apple cider. Right? Our families have some apple trees and stuff, and so we figured in order to do this, we would get ourselves an old-fashioned apple press, right? Apple grinder and press. Now, not a ton of these are made these days because it's not as popular as it used to be to do it. So the first one we found was on Craigslist, and it was from at least 100 years old. Not the ad on Craigslist. Craigslist is not that old, actually. But the apple press itself was ancient. In fact, the frame was so old that it was just falling apart, so we had to build a new framework for it. But the body of it was in okay shape. It was made of cast iron, and that stuff lasts forever. And so we put it together, and I built this steel frame for it, welded it out of 2x4 steel, so it was super stout and solid. And we made our first few years of apple cider with that. And it was a decent way to make apple cider. I mean, it didn't grind apples really well, and it didn't really press them very well, but otherwise it was perfect. There were a couple problems with it. One is that there's this cast iron yoke that holds the screw press, you know, and provides the brace so that you can squish the apples down after you ground them. And it had a crack in it. And so what would happen is as you would tighten that screw press down, that crack would start to spread open, and you couldn't put any more force on it, or else it would completely break somewhere else, right? And you would have nothing left. And so we couldn't really squish the apples. And it had this other problem too. The hopper, the feeder for it, it looked like this nautilus. It was really beautiful shape. It was cool looking. But it didn't really eat apples very easy. And so you'd have to use like a broom handle and stick the apples in there, and every once in a while you'd get broom in there. You know, those up as you were drinking by hand. And it had a tendency, in addition to these perks, it had a tendency that as the apple juice built up inside this thing, the axle that the grinders spun on would kind of stuff up with apple chunks and apple juice and start to force out. But what happens to a cast iron over time as it's left outside?
Rust.
Yeah, it would start to push out the rust. So you get this kind of rusty apple slurry that would want to drip into your apple bucket, right? Which is, I don't think rust infusion is the next health trend, is it? If it is, I mean, we could be marketing this stuff and be millionaires, right? We could do a little special campaign in the church, Emmanuel's Rust Infusion. That'd be perfect. But no, so it had some issues, right? And when we would, the cider tasted great, but if you were going to keep the cider for longer, you needed to like titrate out that rust by adding like lemon juice to it, like different things would get it out of there. But it was a shame, right? Because you had all these steps that had to be added just because the press wasn't working right. And it only mildly functioned, no matter what we had done. We had invested a ton of time and effort, a little bit of money into it, and it still wouldn't work right. It was a frustrating endeavor. And the act of making apple cider is a ton of work, right? You go and shake all those apples out of the tree, you collect them all, you feed them in there. It takes a day at least, or several days to do all this. And at the end, you want something to be right, don't you? You want to have good apple juice. You want it to be clear and beautiful and tasty. And at the end of our efforts, we had something that was tasty, but was rust infused. You know, if you did it wrong, if you didn't catch those drips when they were coming. And I think our Old Testament passage and our song both speak to this theme, right? This idea about putting in effort and expecting an outcome, but not necessarily getting that. Our first passage, and it's interesting because the Psalm and the Old Testament passage both seem to follow similar events to one another. And the language definitely is connected between these two texts. So let's begin first with Isaiah. This passage tells a story in the form of song. Isaiah at the beginning is the singer, and it is about his beloved friend and the vineyard that his friend has planted. This song, often called the Song of the Vineyard, goes like this. Get ready. No, I won't sing for you. That'd be horrible. You'd all leave. You're going to make it to the end of the sermon. And so he says, "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes." So the planter of the vineyard does all this amazing prep work to make everything ready. He has this vineyard, and it's in a place that should naturally produce good grapes. It's on a hill, and it's a fertile hill. And he gets down into the soil, and he pulls out all those rocks and anything that would get in the way of the roots growing deep and broad and strong. He prepares it all for that. He puts the best vines in it so that they'll be fruitful. Right? Varietals that will produce great fruit and great wine. And then he builds a watchtower in the middle of it so that it can be, so he can observe it and make sure no intruders are breaking in, no animals are getting in. Later on in the text, we hear that he actually built a wall around it too, to protect it. Right? So that it didn't get like Lake Wildwood by deers as they jump in. And he hews a wine vat out of the stone in the middle of it to make a place for making the wine. Now this is a major undertaking with the hope that all these labors will lead to good wine production for years to come. This wine or vineyard owner hasn't made any shortcuts or cut any corners in producing this wine, but has done this with an eye to the future, an eye to the investment that's ahead of him. And so when the first crop comes in, instead of yielding good wine grapes, he finds that it produces wild grapes, which apparently in Arkansas are called possum grapes, which I've heard that after my first sermon. I'm pretty excited about that. Possum grapes. Now another translation for the word here rendered is as wild from Hebrew is stinking or sour, which I think works way better. Right? Because he expected it to produce good grapes, but instead it produced stinking sour grapes. Stinking sour grapes. The grapes were not delicious and cultivated, but rather stinky, sour grapes. This is not what you want as a return for all your work. You put in all this effort, you make all the right choices, you do all the things you need to do to produce a good crop, and you get stinking, sour grapes. And there's a shift in the language at this point. The vineyard owner becomes the speaker and describes the problem with his vineyard. He says, "What more was there for me to do for my vineyard that I had not done for it?" What else could he have done? He's got the wall, so it's not the problem of things getting into it and harming the vineyard. The soil is in the perfect place. It's got no rocks in it. It's well aerated. It's on a hillside. It's exactly where these grapes should want to grow. And he expected it to yield grapes. So why did it yield wild grapes? He's done everything for it. And all he's received in return is the stinking sour grapes, which leads to our conclusion. The vineyard owner decides what he will do. And it sounds a little drastic, okay? I'll give you that. Right? What would, we'll read what he does first, then we'll ask you what you will do, so you have time to prep yourselves. "And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its walls, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste, it shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it." So this is like salted earth policy here, right? This is not only tear up the vines, but this is just completely raise the whole site so that it will not be used for that again. What would you do? Put it on the market? That's a good one. There you go. Yeah, that's great too. Yeah. Even if you want to go drastic, you could pull up those old vines and just put a new one. You've already got all the hard work done in terms of the walls and that and the tower and the amendment of the soil. Right? But this is different. This is not a plan for what to do if your vines don't properly produce. Right? This is not a gardening journal here. This seems to be about more than just a man in his vineyard. We're told, "For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting." So this is not about horticulture. This is about a nation and its relationship to its God. The vineyard owner is God, and the vines are Israel and Judah, and they are being judged for their fruit, which is stinky. And it is stinky and sour in this particular way. God had planted them, he had cultivated, he had provided for them, and what came out of them, he had expected justice, but he saw bloodshed. Righteousness, but heard a cry. The people not only don't live up to the standard God had expected of them as his people, but they distorted the standard itself. Right? Justice was replaced with bloodshed. And righteousness, instead of hearing people praise the righteousness of God's people, instead, a cry comes up from those people over how God's people are behaving. And this puts Israel and Judah in a place of judgment. And that's where our song comes in. Israel is suffering in our song. It's not entirely clear how, but the Gentiles are causing them problems. And what is immediately clear, though, is that the words of Isaiah are coming true and are being echoed in this song. The Israelites are experiencing the removal of the hand of God, and they hate it. And so the psalmist expresses a solution. "Turn now, O God of hosts, look down from heaven, behold and tend this vine. Preserve what your right hand has planted. They burn it with fire like rubbish. At the rebuke of your countenance, let them perish. Let your hand be upon the man of your right hand, the Son of Man you have made so strong for yourself. And so will we never turn away from you. Give us life, that we may call upon your name. Restore us, O Lord God of hosts. Show the light of your countenance, and we shall be saved." The solution that the psalmist is inspired to call for is that God would intervene on their behalf. And that the Son of Man, the best of Israel, the one who represents them, would be with them. And that they would be given life, that they can call upon the name of God and then be held fast by his side. The solution we see here is the gospel. It's not give us one more chance. Rather, it is intervene on our behalf because we cannot save ourselves. And that is precisely what God did. He sent his Son, Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, to save his people. And not only his people, but all of the world through the salvation that Jesus offers those who believe in him. They are transformed by his forgiveness and made new. Now, our old apple press, no matter how much work we put into that thing, was always going to have some fatal flaws that would lead it not to produce. That would lead it to behaviors that were not conducive to what we wanted out of it. And so we had to replace it with a new one. Now, the beautiful thing in the gospel of Jesus Christ is not that God gives up on the old and brings in the new, although that is an element in this story that has taken place, in that Israel has been for a time, the Gentiles have been grafted in for a period of time until the full number are there, and then Israelites will be back in. But rather that he takes the old vines with their wildness and transforms them into the new ones. God is not a God who throws things out, but rather he redeems the broken. He takes broken people like you and me and makes us new in Christ. He doesn't just say, oh, Seth is cracked. Seth produces rust and fusion in the world. And throw me out and replace me with a better model. No, he takes my broken life and he bathes it in the blood of his Son, Jesus Christ. And that old man of me dies, and a new one is resurrected. One which is full of the glory of God. God does this exact same thing in your lives too. He's doing it now. He's not tossing out the old, but transforming the old and making all things new. So may we come to him today. May we confess that we have, in fact, produced stinky fruit in this world. And may we ask that he takes our brokenness and redeems it and pours his new life into us. Let's pray. Lord God, thank you that you are the God of new beginnings, the God who takes what is broken and redeems it and heals it. Lord, we pray that you would do this good work in us. Lord, we confess to you that we do not, in fact, produce the work you call us to produce. And we ask for your forgiveness. And we pray, Lord God, that you would help us. Help us to humble ourselves before you. And that you would take our broken lives and redeem them. Restore us, Lord God. And give us the strength to go forth from this place transformed. That we might be people who proclaim your good news in this world and who share your hope with others. And we pray, Lord God, that you would, as we share that hope, that you would open hearts and minds and that you would allow others to receive your good news as well and have their lives transformed as well. And we pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.